Between Dreams and Reality. Chapter 1. The Weight of Expectation. The phone vibrated against the laminate counter, skittering half an inch toward the sink, just as the kettle clicked off with a final gasp of steam. Morning light caught the edge of Marianne's chipped blue mug, casting a thin shadow across her unpainted fingernails. She didn't reach for the phone right away. She already knew what it would be. Another rent reminder. An automate nudge that time and money did not pause for reflection. The screen lit up beside the ancient toaster with its one broken lever. Payment due in 3 days. $1,547.50. She wrapped her fingers around the chipped mug, Caribbean blue ceramic, with a hairline crack running from rim to handle that she'd owned since her first bewildering year in America, and stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then blackened completely. So this was how life announced itself now. Not with the sharp clarity of her mother's voice calling from the yard, not with the certainty of church bells, with digital alerts that vibrated against laminate. She stood barefoot on the cool tile floor of her apartment, each small square the color of weak tea, the grout between them darkened with years of the city grit. The refrigerator's mechanical hum cycled through its familiar rhythm, a low drone like an old man clearing his throat, then a metallic shudder that rattled the half-empty condiment bottles inside, then 3 seconds of perfect silence before starting again. The coffee in her mug released thin ribbons of steam that carried the bitter-sweet scent of beans stretched too far, brewed too weak, a compromise between economy and necessity. Outside the small window above the sink, framed by faded yellow curtains she'd hemmed herself, the sky hung colorless, not the clean slate gray of coming rain, but the exhausted pale of a morning that had given up before it began. A single cloud drifted past, shapeless and slow, like a thought without conviction. She had once imagined a different view. At 19, success had been both clear and clouded in her mind. A beautiful white house near the water, though sometimes she'd wake panicked, wondering if she truly wanted to live so close to storms. Not large, just clean and beautiful. A porch wide enough for 2 chairs, though she'd never been certain who would sit in the second one. Morning light spilling through open windows. A job she could name without hesitation, despite the whispers that told her she might never be enough. When people asked how she was doing, she would smile and say, "I'm good," and mean it, or at least convince herself she did. Back then, success had felt both loud and fragile, a title she craved but feared she couldn't live up to, a sense of arrival that might reveal she had nowhere left to hide. She lifted the mug to her lips. The coffee had gone lukewarm. It wasn't disappointment that surprised her most. It was how familiar it felt, how gently it had woven itself into her days without ever demanding to be named. Growing up in the Caribbean, she had learned early how to dream. Dreams were a kind of currency back home, spoken into being at kitchen tables, passed between aunties like heirlooms, prayed over with the seriousness of survival. Go to America, get educated, build something better, become someone who makes the leaving make sense. She had believed in those dreams with her whole chest, had whispered them into her pillow at night until they became a prayer. The hardest part wasn't leaving. Not the tearful goodbyes at Grantley Adams International Airport, or the hollow ache that settled beneath her ribs during that first flight. It was realizing she might never become the version of herself everyone back home was still waiting for, their faces sun-browned and expectant in the messages and photos they sent. The smell of boiling bush tea drifted into her mind without warning. Sharp, green, comforting, the steam rising from her grandmother's dented aluminum pot with its wooden handle worn smooth from decades of use. For a moment, she could hear her grandmother's voice, steady and sure as the tide. "Child, you work with what you have," she'd say, her fingers deftly stripping leaves from stems. Marianne swallowed, the taste of memory bittersweet on her tongue. Even memory had a way of asking questions she wasn't ready to answer, poking at tender places like a tongue exploring a sore tooth. In those early years, living in America, she pictured herself returning back home in expensive designer clothes, crisp white linen that wouldn't wrinkle in the heat, gold jewelry that caught the Caribbean sun, and soft confidence, carrying proof in her posture that she had done it right. She would speak with certainty, her voice melodic but authoritative, move with ease through the same, answer questions with a smile that said, "It was hard, but look, I made it." Instead, she learned how to soften her accent without losing it entirely, practicing in front of bathroom mirrors until her mouth ached, how to smile through questions that sounded polite but landed heavy, like stones wrapped in velvet. "Where are you really from? Your English is so good. Do you miss home?" Yes, she missed home, but missing was complicated. Home became something that lived inside her rather than around her, a rhythm in her walk, a warmth in her laughter, the way certain songs still tightened her throat without warning. She carried it with her, even when the world around her didn't quite know what to do with it. She set the mug down and leaned against the counter, her thoughts drifting backward as they often did in the quiet moments. She had imagined marriage by now, not a fairy tale, but partnership, a shared language of comfort. Someone who understood the weight of starting over and chose to stay anyway. Work, too, was supposed to feel purposeful and visible by this point. Not just something that paid the bills, but something that reflected who she was, her intelligence, her care, her capacity to build. Mostly, she had imagined certainty. Instead, she had learned flexibility. Her life unfolded in adjustments. A job taken because it was available, not because it was the dream. An apartment chosen for safety rather than beauty. Relationships that taught her more about endurance than permanence. There were moments she rarely spoke about. The nights she cried quietly so no one would hear. The calls home where she said she was doing fine, because anything else felt like failure. She learned how to hold herself together in public while questioning everything in private. And yet, she stayed. That, too, had surprised her. She stayed through loneliness and fatigue, through the ache of being strong longer than she wanted to be. She stayed even when the version of life she once imagined seemed to recede further into the distance, like a shoreline she could no longer reach. Marianne reached for a folded envelope tucked beside the toaster. Inside was an old photograph, creased at the corners, colors slightly faded. It was her younger self, standing barefoot on warm concrete, hair pulled back, eyes bright with possibility. She remembered that day clearly. The certainty in her eyes had been absolute. Everything ahead would make sense. "I tried," she murmured softly, unsure who she was speaking to. There was no bitterness in the words, just honesty. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Outside, a car passed, tires whispering against the pavement. Life continued, indifferent to her reflection. She folded the photo back into the envelope and placed it where it belonged. There would be work today, emails, conversations, responsibilities she handled well, even if no one applauded them. Marianne rested her hands on the counter and stood very still. She had survived. She had adapted. She had built something that functioned. But as the morning stretched quietly before her, a question pressed in. Soft, persistent, impossible to ignore. If this was the life she had managed to build, what would it mean to admit it wasn't the one she came for? Chapter 2. Threads of Connection. Marianne's phone rang while she was rinsing her mug. She let it ring once, twice, then she turned off the faucet and answered. Hello. There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of breath being gathered. Marianne. My love, her mother said, the words tumbling out warm and quick. Thank God. I was starting to think you were sleeping still, but I know you don't sleep late anymore. Marianne leaned her hip against the counter and closed her eyes briefly. I'm here, Mummy. In the background, she could hear familiar sounds. Aluminum pots shifting against cast iron, a radio crackling with a calypso rhythm beneath static, someone passing by and greeting her mother with a boisterous, "Morning, Miss Elma." Life continuing in that sun-drenched kitchen where she had left it 7 years and 4 months ago. Listen, darling. Her mother's voice shifted just slightly, still warm as island honey, but purposeful now, the way it got when she was about to thread a needle. You know I don't like to bother you with these things. You work so hard. But the light bill came, and Jesus, Mary, I nearly fainted when I opened it. They're saying it's the heat, all the fans running day and night. The air feels stuck. What are we supposed to do? Melt right into the floorboards? And then your cousin, you remember I told you he's doing so well in school? Top of his class in mathematics. That boy's brain like a calculator. Mummy, Marianne said gently, her own voice sounding thin against the richness of her mother's. His fees are due Friday for that club he is part of. Remember, I told you about that mathematics club with the blue and gold pins they wear? The organization sent a letter on cream paper with a gold seal. Very stern. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had softened into something careful, like footsteps around a sleeping baby. We thought maybe, since you're working steady and all, you might help us cover part of it, just until next month when your uncle gets paid at the refinery. Just until next month. The phrase landed softly on Marianne's ear like a familiar prayer, carrying the weight of 24 repetitions across seasons and years. How much? Marianne asked. Another pause, longer this time. 400, her mother said gently. American. But if that's too much, Marianne swallowed. 400 for the bill. 300 she'd already sent 2 weeks ago. About 1,500 due for her own rent in a few days. 200 still sitting on her credit card from groceries and gas. Her thumb pressed lightly into the edge of the counter. I can send something, she said. I'll see what I can do. Her mother exhaled. I knew you would. God bless you, my child. You've always had a good head. Everyone says it. Marianne smiled even though no one could see her. They spoke a few minutes longer, about weather, about a neighbor who had fallen ill, about nothing that required details. When they hung up, her mother ended the call the same way she always did. We're so proud of you. Marianne stared at the darkened screen after the call ended. She didn't correct her. She didn't say that pride didn't pay bills, that being the one who made it was starting to feel like a role she was understudying without rehearsal. She walked to the small table by the window and sat down, pulling her phone back into her hands. Her banking app loaded slowly. She watched the numbers appear, then disappear as she moved money between accounts. She scheduled the transfer. $250. Not the full amount, but enough to help. Enough to quiet the immediate worry. Enough to postpone her own. She told herself she would figure out the rest later. Later had become a habit. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from social media, a memory from years ago, a photo of her smiling in a dress she no longer owned, arm linked with friends whose lives had since scattered in directions she tried not to compare herself to. She opened the app anyway. She posted a photo she'd taken earlier that morning. The window, the coffee, the clean lines of the apartment. The caption was simple, grateful for quiet mornings. As the post uploaded, she glanced around the room. The chair by the table wobbled when she shifted her weight. A stack of unopened mail sat tucked beside a cookbook she rarely had time to use. The room felt tired. She took a quick shower and got ready for work without lingering. Then she grabbed her bag and left. At the office, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a flat, colorless wash. The carpet was industrial gray, worn thin near the doorways. Someone had microwaved fish in the break room. The smell clung to the air, mixing with burnt coffee and the chemical sweetness of air freshener. Marianne slipped into her cubicle, the fabric walls a muted beige that absorbed sound and ambition equally. Her desk was neat, a single framed photo facing away from the aisle, a coffee mug that said Monday Motivation, pins arranged in a cup. Her manager appeared at the partition edge before she'd even logged in, coffee in hand, already mid-thought. "Morning, Marie." She looked up, keeping her voice even. "It's Marianne." Right, my bad." He took a sip, unbothered. "Hey, I was telling Jenkins you'd be perfect for the client call this afternoon. You have that." He gestured vaguely with his free hand. "That warm thing. Very personable. They'll love you." She nodded, fingers already moving toward her keyboard. "Seriously," he continued, leaning against the partition. "You're so well-spoken. It's great." The words landed exactly where they always did, in that space between her ribs where irritation couldn't quite become anger, where clarity couldn't quite become confrontation. "Thank you," she said. He was already walking away. At her desk, she answered emails with the careful precision she'd perfected, professional, polite, invisible. She scheduled meetings. She smiled when spoken to. She played the version of herself that kept the paycheck coming. No one noticed how close she was to just staying afloat. When the paycheck came, it was usually gone by the next day. Bills paid, money sent to help family back home. The same cycle every time. No one noticed when she stared at her screen a second longer than necessary, breath held, jaw tight. There was a moment, brief and quiet, when she almost stood up and said something, anything, when the words, "I'm tired," pressed just beneath her tongue. Instead, she swallowed and kept typing. By the time she returned home that evening, her body felt heavy. She kicked off her shoes and sat on the edge of the couch without turning on a light. She was tired of living this way, going through the motions, always reacting, never stopping. She needed a break. She needed to start caring for herself instead of constantly worrying about everyone else and scrambling to pay bills. She needed help. She opened the Notes app. Her fingers paused over the screen. Then she typed one sentence. "I can't keep living like this." She saved it. When she set the phone aside, the quiet that followed felt unfamiliar, but deliberate. Like the beginning of a change she hadn't figured out yet. Chapter 3. Defining Success. After a long day at work, she stopped by the grocery store the next evening to pick up a few things she needed. All day, a nagging feeling followed her, that she was behind, that she wasn't where she wanted to be. At the grocery store, the realization didn't come only as a thought. It came as a voice. Marianne was standing in the international foods aisle, her cart angled beside her, when she heard two women just behind her. Their voices were casual and unguarded, the kind people used when they didn't think anyone else was listening. "I just don't understand people who waste time," one of them said, laughing lightly. "If you're not where you want to be by now, that's kind of on you." Marianne's hand paused over a bag of rice. Exactly, the other woman replied. I mean, we all have choices. A soca song drifted through the store speakers, thin and distorted, the kind her uncle used to play on Sunday mornings while oil crackled and the house filled with steam. The smell of a curry chicken from the next aisle tightened her throat. She stood there longer than necessary, fingers resting against the shelf. Choices. The word followed her to the register. She unloaded her groceries carefully, one item at a time. Rice, beans, a bundle of collard greens still damp from the mister, carrots, onions, a small package of chicken thighs she'd held for a full minute before adding to the cart, calculating. The cashier's scanner beeped in steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Marianne watched the total climb on the small screen mounted above the register. Her pulse kept time with the numbers. $52.18, $64.90, $78.33. Behind her, someone shifted their weight. A cartwheel squeaked. She felt the line pressing forward without moving. That particular tension of people waiting, checking phones, sighing quietly. The cashier reached for the mangoes. Beep. $86.42. She slid her card through the reader, the plastic edge catching slightly against her thumb. The machine blinked. Declined. She stared at the screen, surprised. The last time she checked, there had been funds in her account. Heat crept up the back of her neck. She pulled the card out, wiped it against her jeans even though she knew it wasn't the stripe, slid it through again, slower this time, as if carefulness could change the balance. Declined. The beep sounded different this time, louder, final. Behind her, a man cleared his throat. Not unkind, just impatient. A small sound that landed like a hand on her shoulder. The cashier's eyes softened. She'd seen this before. I can take something off, she said quietly, already reaching. Marianne's hands were shaking. She nodded once, jaw tight, and picked up the chicken. The package was cold and slick against her palms. She set it on the counter beside the register. The cashier scanned it backward. The total dropped. Not enough. Marianne reached for the mangoes next. 3 of them, still firm, the kind she would have sliced tomorrow morning and eaten slowly, standing at the window. She placed them gently beside the chicken. The numbers fell again. Still not enough. Her fingers hovered over the cart. She could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. She picked up the second bag of rice, the extra one, the one she'd added because it was on sale, because planning ahead was supposed to be smart, and handed it over. The cashier took it without a word. Beep. $47.80. Marianne slid her card through one more time. The machine paused, then approved, her breath released. She packed what remained into 2 plastic bags, fingers clumsy, aware of every second she was still standing there. The collard greens, the beans, the carrots that would last her the week if she was careful. Thank you, she said softly. The cashier nodded. Marianne lifted the bags, light now, and stepped aside. As she walked toward the exit, she passed the end of the register. The chicken sat there in a small pile with the mangoes and the rice. She pushed through the automatic doors. The air outside hit her face, sharper than it should have been. She opened her bank's mobile app to confirm. An automatic payment from one of her bills had processed an hour earlier, draining the account. She didn't cry. She just kept walking, plastic grocery bags cutting crescents into her palms, the sidewalk's uneven concrete catching at her heels. The late afternoon sun cast her shadow long and thin beside her. Her phone rang halfway home, vibrating against her hip through the thin fabric of her pocket. She already knew who it was from the custom ringtone, a steel drum melody she'd chosen years ago. Marianne, her cousin said quickly, his voice tight with that familiar strain that always preceded a request. The car broke down. Transmission's shot. Mechanic says it's grinding metal on metal. I don't know what to do. She stopped walking beneath the rustling canopy of a maple tree, its leaves already tinged orange at the edges. How much? She asked, shifting the bags to her other hand, feeling the plastic stretch dangerously. About 600, he said, the number hanging between them like something physical. Marianne closed her eyes, feeling the weight of invisible math pressing down on her shoulders. I'll call you back, she said, each word measured and even. When the call ended, she stood still for a moment longer than necessary, watching a line of ants navigate near her shoes. Not panicked, just calculating. At home, she unpacked the groceries slowly, lining everything up the way she always did. Control as habit, order as comfort. A knock came at the door. Her neighbor stood there, Amara, the woman from 3B who'd moved in 6 months ago. Early 20s, maybe. Dark skin, hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her accent was thick, unmistakably West African, the kind that made other tenants speak louder and slower without realizing it. I'm sorry to bother you, Amara said, hands clasped in front of her. I know we don't really talk much. Marianne noticed the way she stood, shoulders slightly hunched, like she was trying to take up less space in the doorway. It's okay, Marianne said. What's going on? Amara glanced down the hallway, then back at her. I heard you work in an office. A professional job? Marianne nodded. I don't really know anyone here who works in a professional setting, Amara continued. I need advice. Marianne nodded again, signaling for her to keep going. I got a job offer today, Amara continued, words coming faster now. It's at a nursing home. CNA position. The pay is okay. Not great, but steady. Benefits after 90 days. She paused, worrying her bottom lip. My mom and dad says I should wait. I didn't come all this way to change bedpans. That I should hold out for something better. Something that uses my degree. What's your degree in? Marianne asked. Accounting. Amara's voice softened. Back home. But here? She made a small gesture with her hand. Here it doesn't count the same way. They want American experience, American credentials. Everything I already did, I have to do again. Marianne felt something tighten in her chest. She knew that particular exhaustion, the kind that came from being qualified and invisible at the same time. My mom and dad keep saying, you're better than this. Don't settle. Amara looked directly at Marianne now, eyes searching. But I've been here 8 months. I'm living with a friend in a 1-bedroom apartment. I have family that depends on me back home. I can't keep asking my friend for money. Her voice dropped. I don't know what to do. What would you do? The question hung between them. For a moment, Marianne felt the old answer rise, the one she'd been taught, the one she'd repeated to herself in laundry rooms and on bus rides home. Push harder. Don't waste time. Prove yourself. Make the sacrifice worth it. But then she saw the checkout counter, the declined card, the call she hadn't returned. I'd ask what you need right now, she said. Not what looks impressive, what actually lets you rest and eat. The woman nodded slowly. Thank you. After she left, Marianne leaned against the door, her pulse thudding in her ears. She slid down the wall until she hit the floor, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, not from emptiness, but from exhaustion, from the weight of constant calculation. Something shifted in her chest, a realization forming. Success wasn't some distant shore she'd reach if she just kept swimming hard enough. It existed in ordinary moments, Tuesday dinners, morning coffee, breath between decisions. The thought made her stomach tighten, which meant it was true. She crossed to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a yellowed paper, creased from years of folding and unfolding. Milestones by 25, by 30, by 35, each age circled in different colored ink. She unfolded it completely, then tore it cleanly down the middle. Then again, the pieces fluttered into the trash can. Her phone buzzed against the counter. She let it. When she settled back onto the couch, she felt different, not hollow, but open, like she'd removed a wall she hadn't realized was unnecessary. For the first time in years, she wasn't racing to catch up. She'd reached the edge of one life and stood looking out at another. Chapter 4. Building a New Foundation. Marianne woke to light seeping through the curtain gap, painting uneven stripes across her bedroom wall. She watched it shift, waiting for the familiar morning panic to set in. The mental calculations, the rehearsed excuses, the inventory of what remained. But her body stayed quiet. She just breathed. Every morning for years had been a checkpoint, a moment to measure how far she lagged behind some imagined timeline of success. Yesterday's abandoned groceries at the register and her cousin's call should have sent her spiraling. This morning refused to punish her for it. Her phone vibrated once. The screen illuminated, then faded. She glanced at it without reaching, letting several seconds pass before finally picking it up. Her cousin, again, about the transmission. "Can you call when you wake up? Just need to talk." The message carried that familiar weight, the assumption she would drop everything, smooth things over before anyone got uncomfortable, the expectation she'd always met. Her chest constricted. Not today. Caring for her family didn't mean she couldn't care for herself first. This was the moment of truth. Her thumbs hovered as yesterday's memories flashed, the items left behind, the declined card's harsh beep, her cousin's strained voice saying 600. She typed carefully, "I can call later today. I'm okay. I hope you are too." After reading it once, she sent the message, placed the phone face down, and waited. Nothing bad happened. No follow-up message arrived demanding explanation. No accusation. No spiral of guilt chasing her down the morning. She sat up and swung her feet to the floor, feeling the cool wood beneath her toes. In the kitchen, she filled the kettle and turned on the stove. Click of the burner, blue flame, water beginning its quiet journey toward boiling. These morning movements had once felt like placeholders, mere filler until her actual life could start. Today they felt like anchors, proof she existed, proof she could function, proof she deserved to begin a day without immediately solving someone else's crisis. She poured the coffee and, rather than gulping it standing at the counter as usual, she pulled out a chair and lowered herself into it. She remained seated. She sipped, actually tasting the coffee this time. Around her, the apartment held quiet evidence of her existence. A pothos vine by the window she'd nearly killed last winter, now unfurling new leaves after months of patient care. A half-filled journal on the table, pages dog-eared and ink-smudged. The tarnished keychain hanging by the door, carried from her hometown years ago, its metal worn smooth from years of worry. Later that morning, Marianne ventured out without her phone, the absence of its weight in her pocket both unsettling and liberating. The stairs didn't trigger her usual spiral of what-ifs. The neighborhood unfolded around her at its own rhythm as she drifted past familiar landmarks, the Sunday cafe, the bus shelter where tears had once betrayed her after a particularly brutal shift, the bookstore whose window displays she'd admired but never investigated. Until today. Inside, she ran her fingers along the book spines, familiar with the smell of paper. Nothing specific caught her attention until she noticed a simple notebook, plain with clean pages and a flexible binding. She paid with bills and coins, avoiding the risk of another card rejection. On her way out, she noticed a flyer for a free financial literacy workshop. She took one, deciding it was something worth looking into. She needed to manage her finances better, instead of always relying on the next paycheck. There had to be a better way to live. At home, the notebook lay open before her, its blank page an invitation rather than a demand. Her pen remained untouched. The emptiness itself was enough, a pocket of permission in her otherwise scheduled existence, a space that required no justification. As shadows lengthened across the apartment floor, Marianne noticed her shoulders had dropped an inch from their usual position near her ears. The weight remained: bills, obligations, tomorrow's problems. But she stopped holding her breath against their arrival. She remembered the younger version of herself, promising that if she worked hard enough, she wouldn't always have to count pennies. Yet she was still following the same pattern, making no real changes. "It's been tough, but you're still standing," she murmured into the quiet. "Life isn't easy, but you're making it work." She exhaled. Making it work wasn't enough anymore. Her eyes went back to the flyer she'd picked up at the bookstore earlier. She would go to the workshop and start there. Something had to change, because if it didn't, the cycle would continue. That evening, she moved through simple rituals that once felt like chores, but now felt like choices. Chopping vegetables, setting her single place at the table rather than eating over the sink, or washing each dish before the soap bubbles disappeared. As she sat down to relax, her phone buzzed again. Another bill paid. The tutoring money that arrived that afternoon covered the electric bill, with nothing left over. She noticed the credit card notification and deliberately swiped it away. Tomorrow's problem. Small victories. Invisible progress. As night settled, she stood at her window watching streetlights flicker on like distant stars. Someone's music drifted up from an open window. An old song her mother used to hum while folding laundry. Marianne aligned her shoes by the door, then cracked the window just enough to let the night air slip in, cool against her face. She stood there, cup of tea warming her hands, watching the light move slowly across the wall. Between her fingers, steam rose in thin wisps and faded before reaching her face. The blueprint she'd once drawn for her life had long since faded. What remained instead were the walls and rooms she'd built day by day, imperfect, unfinished, but standing. She knew changes had to be made. She couldn't keep living the same way forever, letting each month close without relief. And yet, she also knew this. She was not unhappy. This wasn't the life she had envisioned. She didn't have the job title she once imagined, or money sitting comfortably in the bank. She didn't have the house, the partner, the marriage. She didn't have children, and time felt louder now as she approached 36. Those facts still mattered. They still stung. But she was alive. She had her health. She had family, sometimes overwhelming, sometimes difficult, but loving. She had a job. There was stability here. There was a dignity in what she had built. Something settled in her chest. Not resignation and not panic, but clarity. She didn't need to tear everything down to move forward. She could adjust. She could choose differently. She could take one step at a time without undoing the ground beneath her. She was grateful, not because everything was perfect, but because she was still here, because she still had options, because opportunity hadn't passed her by. She stood there a moment longer, steady on her feet, knowing tomorrow didn't have to look like today. The simple fact that she was still standing meant she could decide what came next. Tomorrow, she would start small, make a few phone calls, send one email, attend the workshop, ask one question she'd been avoiding.